So as you know, the transfer portal is now closed, and once again, it has completely reshaped the landscape of college basketball. And we are now seeing teams that look like they have legitimate rosters that could win a national title, and others that didn't make the moves that we expected. So today, I'm going to be breaking down all of the biggest winners and losers of the transfer portal, and a team that I thought had an underrated portal was Richard Pitino and the Xavier Musketeers. And Xavier is not the flashiest portal winner by any means, but this is exactly the kind of offseason that can quietly change a team's ceiling. The Musketeers got bigger, more athletic, and more talented by adding 4 likely starters from the portal in Chance Westry, Ruben Dominguez, Mike Nwoku, and True Washington. And Xavier may not have added the biggest names in the portal, but they added some real pieces that fit. And to me, this feels like a team that could be much better than people expect next season. But another underrated winner of mine is St. Louis, and I think Josh Schertz deserves some real credit because retaining talent outside the power conferences is almost impossible to do in this era of college basketball. The Billikens brought back 5 rotation players from a 29-win team last season, and every one of those returners averaged at least 9 points per game, which means that the Billikens should once again have one of the best offenses in all of college basketball next season. And St. Louis still needs some depth, so there is some work to do, but keeping the core together makes them one of the sneakiest winners of the offseason to me. But now I want to get into the real heavy hitters, starting with the team that may have won the offseason without even needing a huge portal class, and that team is Todd Golden and the Florida Gators. And for me, Florida might be the biggest winner in all of college basketball because this offseason has been built on something that might be even more valuable than portal additions, and that's elite retention. Alex Condon is back. Thomas Houck just announced he's coming back. Boogie Fland is back as well, and if Ruben Chinulu returns like I think he will, Florida has a real case to be the preseason #1 team in the entire country. The Condon Houck Chinulu frontcourt gives them size, passing, rebounding, and physicality that almost nobody can match, and this was already an SEC champion and #1 seed this past season, and now Todd Golden is looking like he's going to bring back the entirety of his core. And in a sport where everyone is rebuilding each and every season, Florida is running it back with a monster of a roster. But while Florida kept almost everything, Kentucky is dealing with the exact opposite problem, and that's exactly why Kentucky is one of the biggest losers of the transfer portal so far to me, because their roster still feels incomplete, and that is a dangerous place to be in, especially for Mark Pope, who is on the hot seat there in Lexington. The Wildcats lost their top 5 scorers, and while Zoom Diallo and Alex Wilkins are both nice guard additions out of the portal, this team still has a major frontcourt questions and not enough proven depth. The bigger issue to me also is the perception, because Mark Pope has missed on several key portal targets and the pressure is already building and you can feel it. And at Kentucky, you do not get much patience when the roster looks thin, and there is still time to recover, but right now this feels like a program scrambling while other contenders are already built and ready to go for next season. And another winner of mine is Duke, and the Blue Devils did not need to completely rebuild this offseason, but John Shire used the portal to fix some specific needs, and that is why the Blue Devils are a major winner to me. John Blackwell is the headline addition out of the portal for Duke because he gives them a proven veteran guard who can shoot, drive, cut, and create offense, and will be the focal point on that end of the floor, and that was a huge need with the departure of Cameron Boozer. Drew Charnowski is another player they added out of the portal, and he's not as flashy, but he gives them additional front court depth, toughness, passing, and defensive value, especially next to Patrick Ngungba, who announced that he is returning for Duke next season. And the Blue Devils also retained important guards like Caleb Foster and Caden Boozer, so inexperience should not be the same concern that we had for them last season. And this roster right now has a path to being elite on both ends of the floor, and it still looks like they have opportunities to get Dame Sarr back and maybe even Allen Graves out of the portal. And right now, I'm loving what John Shire has done with this roster. But one roster I'm not liking so much is the Kansas Jayhawks, and they're in a really uncomfortable spot right now because Bill Self still has so much work to do. The Jayhawks return only 2 scholarship players. They lost Flory Badunga to Louisville and still need to rebuild almost the entire starting lineup, as Bryson Tiller also left and went to Missouri. Keanu Dawes and Leroy Blyden Jr. are the additions out of the portal so far, but they don't solve everything, that's for sure. And this entire offseason feels really tied to whether Kansas lands Tyron Stokes, who is the #1 high school player in the country. And if they get him, I do think the outlook for next season changes quickly. But if they don't, this could go down as one of the roughest Kansas off seasons that we've seen in a very long time. And as days keep going on, the margin for error is getting smaller and smaller, and Kansas could be in store for yet another disappointing season. But another team that has a ton of retention going into next season is the Illinois Fighting Illini, and they handled this offseason so far like the national contender that they were. They retained Tomislav Ivicic, David Markovic, Jake Davis, Andreas Stojakovic, and Zvonimir Ivicic from a Final Four roster this past season, which is massive in today's portal era. And then Brad Underwood went out and added Stefan Vox from Providence, and that is the kind of piece that can raise the ceiling. Vox has size, shooting, and playmaking there in the backcourt, and he is great in the pick and roll and should be the perfect replacement for Keaton Wagler, who is now heading to the NBA. And Illinois as a whole has size, continuity, shooting, and multiple players who can get 20 points on any given night, and this might be the Big Ten favorite heading into next season, and it feels like another banner chase is very real for the Illini. But on the other hand, a team that was not able to retain their key pieces was the Georgia Bulldogs, and for me, Georgia is a painful loser this transfer portal because this program was supposed to build on a breakthrough season. The Bulldogs won 20 games, reached the NCAA tournament, and were positioned to return their 9 leading scorers, but instead 5 of them decided to enter the portal, including leading scorer Jeremiah Wilkinson and defensive anchor Samto Cyril. And the Cyril is the loss that really hurts to me because Georgia was 12.5 points per 100 possessions better when he was on the floor for the Bulldogs. And they did make a move in the portal and acquire Freddie Dillon, which gives them a strong backcourt piece and a good replacement for Jeremiah Wilkinson. But the identity of this team has changed extremely fast because to me, Georgia went from a potential riser from last season to next to now being a major rebuild almost overnight. And one of the teams that benefited directly from Georgia's losses in the transfer portal was Miami because they were the team that ended up landing Samto Cyril out of the transfer portal. And Miami is one of the most interesting winners to me because Jay Lucas is clearly building with a plan in year 2. The Hurricanes added a Caden Lewis who has real breakout potential as a sophomore, and they paired him with returnees Shelton Henderson and Dante Allen to form a trio of sophomores that could be really good there for Miami. Then they went and rebuilt the front court with Deshaun Good and Samto Cyril, like I mentioned. And Cyril to me is especially important because he gives Miami a defensive anchor who can protect the rim and replace some of what Ernest Udeh Jr. did for them last season. And this roster has balance, really good guard talent, defensive presence, rebounding, and skill. And Miami may still be ahead of schedule with Jay Lucas there at the helm, and the vision is already easy to see. But while Miami is on the rise in the ACC, it's Notre Dame who looks like a program that is trying to stop the bleeding, and they are one of the biggest losers in the portal because the Irish lost the exact core that could have made them dangerous this next season. Jalen Harrelson, Cole Serta, and Marcus Burton all left in the portal, and that would have been a really strong core to an ACC team for next season. And now Micah Shrewsbury is trying to rebuild with value pieces like Braden Smith, Ethan Roberts, and Logan Duncombe, the transfer from Winthrop. And those are useful players, but the overall talent level has clearly dropped from a season ago. And the bigger concern right now looks to be resources. And if Notre Dame cannot pay market value, this could be happening every offseason for the Fighting Irish. And right now, this does not look like an NCAA tournament roster to me. And in the transfer portal, one team's loss is another team's gain, and that is exactly what happened with Notre Dame and Indiana because that's exactly where Marcus Burton has landed for next season. And Indiana is a winner because Darren DeVries fixed the exact issues that held his team back a season ago. The Hoosiers needed a real point guard, and that's where Marcus Burton comes in because he gives them just that. He's a difference maker, a former Indiana Mr. Basketball, and the type of lead guard who can change the entire offense for the the Hoosiers. And the front court also looks dramatically better with Samit Yigitoglu from SMU and Aiden Sherrill from Alabama both coming in and giving Indiana 2 legitimate 7-footers, although I'm not exactly sure what the fit is going to look like between the two of them. But the front court was last season's weakness, and now it could be a strength of the Hoosiers. And after a frustrating finish to DeVries' first year, this portal class has completely changed the energy around the program, and Indiana finally has some real optimism again. And I don't want to speak too early, but I would expect the Hoosiers back in March Madness next season. But maybe the most unfortunate loser is the TCU Horned Frogs, because this offseason has completely flipped the outlook of this roster. The Horned Frogs were expected to return 4 starters from a team that won 11 games in one of the hardest conferences in the country in the Big 12, and the David Punch Xavier Edmonds frontcourt looked like one of the most underrated in the entire country. But now Punch is at Texas, Lilavicious is at Clemson, and TCU has not replaced that frontcourt production yet. They also lost several depth pieces who likely would have played bigger roles for TCU next season, and this is the harsh reality of the portal, because even solid high major programs like TCU can get raided by the portal if they are not at the top when it comes to available money. But the team that stole David Punch in the transfer portal is definitely one of the major winners, and that's the Texas Longhorns. And honestly, what Sean Miller has done with Texas this offseason might have them at the top of my list in terms of winners out of the portal. David Punch gives them one of the most versatile defenders in the portal because he's a forward who can guard multiple positions and change the entire defensive ceiling, and I think he's in for an even better season next year with the Longhorns. Then they brought in Isaiah Johnson from Colorado, who gives them scoring and playmaking at the point guard position and was one of the best freshmen in all of college basketball last season. Elijah Freeman and Amari Evans add size and athleticism on the wing, and then they just got a commitment from Mikey Lewis, who brings microwave scoring there in the backcourt. And Texas already had a strong base, especially with Matas Vokatitis announcing that he's returning for next season and a top 15 incoming recruiting class. But the portal has already pushed this roster into national title contender for me. They should be huge, switchable, physical, and capable of competing near the top of the SEC. And right now, looking at this roster, I think they're top 10 in the country. And a team that just continues to go downhill is Kansas State. And to me, they're a loser because this roster right now just does not look Big 12 ready on paper. Casey Alexander has added 9 transfers, so it's not like the Wildcats weren't active during the transfer portal, but the issue is the level of proven talent that they've brought in. None of the additions were graded as 4-star transfers or better. None of them have played on an NCAA tournament team last year, and none of the top Belmont pieces followed Alexander to Manhattan in Drew Sharnowski and Tyler Lundblade, and I really thought at least one of them would. They only added one player out of the portal who averaged more than 9 points per game this past season. So right now, it's looking like Alexander is going to have to overachieve in order to even have a solid season in year 1 with the Wildcats, because the Big 12 is not a conference where you can afford to not have top tier talent. But I gotta mention maybe the most surprising team out of the transfer portal to me, and that's Tennessee. And I do think they're a winner because Rick Barnes attacked the exact weaknesses that has limited this program in March, and that is offense. The Vols are usually elite defensively, physical on the glass, and incredibly hard to play against, but scoring has always been the main issue there for Rick Barnes. But this portal class completely changes that. They got Terrence Hill Jr. from VCU, who gives them shot creation and maturity. Jalen Harrelson from Notre Dame brings size and versatility. Day-Day Ames comes in and adds high-volume shot making. Tyler Lundblade gives them elite shooting. And then add in a guy like Miles Rubin, who brings defense and rim protection. And you can see that Tennessee didn't necessarily abandon its identity, but it added the offensive pieces it needed and maybe more. And that makes the Vols one of the most fascinating teams in the country. And I'm very intrigued to see how it all fits together next season. But with Tennessee bringing in all that talent, you have a team like Wake Forest who is losing that type of talent that it once had. And right now, Wake Forest is a loser because this program is starting to feel like a feeder system in the transfer portal. Steve Forbes has done a good job evaluating and developing talent time and time again, but that almost makes the situation even more frustrating. Juke Harris is gone, Miles Colvin is gone, Quentin Coleman, the top recruit, was poached by Illinois, which is brutal, and it just seems like Wake Forest can't catch a break right now. Now, they did add some solid recruits out of the portal like Kavir Kennedy, Justin Ray, and Jamari McDowell, and those players can definitely help next season, but this still feels like a major step back in the wrong direction, and the issue definitely isn't coaching. I believe it's their resources, and in this version of college basketball, finding good players is only half the battle. You also have to keep them, and that's the one thing that Wake Forest has just not been able to do. But one program that looks to have completely changed their outlook for next season is Providence, and that's not only by hiring Brian Hodgson, but it's also the fact that he wasted no time changing the feel of the program. After taking over, he immediately built one of the better portal classes in the Big East. Miles Byrd is definitely the headline piece because he is an elite defensive wing and one of the best perimeter defenders in the entire portal. Then you got Malik Mack, who also comes in and gives them guard talent there in the backcourt. Devin Vanderpool is a smart winning type of addition. Ryan Sabal adds shooting, especially after they didn't get Wes Ennis. And then Dink Pate from the G League gives them high upside talent who could become an all Big East type of player next season. And now Providence suddenly looks older, tougher, and more talented than they have been for the past couple of seasons. And right now, the Big East may not just be a two-team race between St. John's and UConn anymore. But one team in the Big East that definitely doesn't have the resources is Seton Hall, and they're a loser because this is the exact nightmare smaller budget high major programs are facing. Shaheen Holloway did a really good job rebuilding the Pirates into a 21-win team this past season, but the reward for that was basically losing their entire roster. Seton Hall only returns one rotation player who averaged more than 4 points per game this past season, because now Najee Hines is gone to UConn, Bud Clark, TJ Simpkins, Mike Williams, and others are gone as well. And they brought in the additions of Roddy Anderson, Dell Jones, and Simeon Wilshire, which definitely can help, but this is still a massive reset from what was a very good Big East program this past season. And Seton Hall can develop players, they've definitely proven that, but until the resources catch up, keeping them is going to be the problem. But there was another Big East program that was a winner, and that has to be Dan Hurley and the UConn Huskies. And you guessed it, Hurley did what UConn always seems to do now, and that's plug in the right players into the right roles. Nicholas Haminia comes in from Duke and gives them size, shooting potential, and high-level pedigree after starting his career there with the Blue Devils, and should be a good Alex Caravan replacement. Then you got Najee Hines, who comes in to replace Taurus Reed, and he gives them a massive front court piece who has proven he can score inside, rebound the ball, and block shots. And he is the exact kind of big UConn can develop, especially after losing Eric Riba. And there's definitely still a few holes that I think UConn needs to fill, like getting some more interior depth and adding another guard. But the starting lineup right now of Silas Demery, Braylon Mullins, Jaden Ross, Nicholas Haminia, and Najee Hines is already looking like one of the best in the entire country. And the last loser I want to mention is Santa Clara, but honestly, this is more about the system than anything this program did wrong. Herb Sendek has done a fantastic job finding hidden gems and developing NBA level talent. Remember, Jalen Williams and Brandon Pajemski both came through that pipeline. Then you had Alan Graves, who looked like the next one as he went from an unranked recruit to a potential NBA draft pick this season. But now, Graves is unlikely to finish his career at Santa Clara as he entered the transfer portal and is one of the top ranked players in the portal right now. Christian Hammond is also gone to NC State after leading the team in scoring this past season, and Santa Clara had a chance to be dangerous next year and maybe even a second weekend threat in March Madness, but the portal definitely took away that ceiling. And you can't think I was going to go over the biggest winners in the transfer portal and not mention Pat Kelsey and the Louisville Cardinals, because Louisville is absolutely a portal winner from a talent standpoint that they brought in. But honestly, I do think this is the most complicated winner on the list. Pat Kelsey landed Flory Badunga, who is arguably the top overall transfer that was available, plus plus Jackson Shellstad, Carter Knox, and Alvaro Folgueras to make what might be the best portal class that we've seen. And this is a massive talent haul, but the biggest question is going to be how these pieces fit together. Shellstad is definitely more of a score-first guard. You got Knox, who is not a high assist creator either. Badunga is a good big, but he's not necessarily an offensive organizer and is well known for his defensive talent. And then Alvaro Folgueras is definitely more of a catch-and-shoot type of guy. So to me, the biggest question is who is going to set the table for others. That is the concern, because Louisville might have the most talented portal class in the country, but talent only works if the pieces fit together. So there's definitely potential that this roster could be absolutely awesome next season, but it also could be awkward with the fit, and it's something we're just gonna have to wait and see. So that brings us to the ultimate question of who actually won the transfer portal, and I'm curious to know your thoughts. So let me know in the comments down below your biggest winners and losers out of the transfer portal, and what did you think of my list? Also, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.